All right. This is the businessman bodybuilder. How to add 10 to 20 pounds of muscle in under a year while running a full time business or practice without living 24/7 like a professional bodybuilder and while being over the age of 35. So, this is a really specific demographic of people I'm talking to here. And the main reason for this is because right now I'm working with about 75 guys on my coaching team right now. So 75 guys that I'm helping achieve their dream physiques. What I see mainly from the guys I work with, from the data that I've kept over the past year, is the guys that do the best in this program, in this specific program, are business owners, guys that have started a business from ground zero, and guys that are over the age of 35, and a combination of the two. Um, I genuinely believe the main reason for that is because these guys, they understand the value of work ethic and delayed gratification. Because when you start something from ground zero, right, you put all of your eggs into one basket and you do not let yourself fail. And you know for a goddamn fact, when you put your mind to something and put 100% of your fucking effort into it, you're going to get a return on that, right? Like, these are the guys that transfer that same mindset into building their physique. And this is why these guys are the most successful in my program. And this is exactly who I'm talking to in this specific video. And I want to give you guys a framework of exactly how I implement my system with these guys. So basically, just understand this first. So this is just an iteration of the true bodybuilder method. So if you guys haven't watched my hour-long video on the true bodybuilder method, it's titled "How to Go from Mediocre Physique to High Level Physique in 8 months Using the True Bodybuilder Method." I'm going to link it here. Go ahead and watch that video because it's going to explain this in a lot more detail. It's going to make a lot more sense. So finish watching this one first, then go watch that other hour-long video, and this is going to make a lot more sense. But this is basically just how I implement that exact same system within this demographic: business owners over the age of 35. So before I really get into this, I want to just go over this quote here because this is really, really important. Now, for those of you guys that don't know, before I started my online coaching business and did this full time, I actually worked at a commercial gym. It was called Equinox. So, like, you guys are probably familiar with Equinox. It's a luxury gym. They have a million different locations across the U.S. And the guys that work out there, and a lot of my clients there, they were business owners. They're very, very successful business owners. And I remember specifically there's this one client there. His name's Matt. Matt was a really fucking hard worker. We would do sessions at 7 a.m. 3 times a week, like every single week, and we would just he would just kill it. Like, this guy was a fucking this guy's a fucking madman. And I remember him saying this to me because he was 50 years old. He was in pretty good shape, but he wasn't in like bodybuilder shape, right? Not like these guys over here. And he gave me this one quote. And he said, business and bodybuilding don't mix. And it kind of sat with me because a lot of guys that run businesses, they still have aspirations to build their dream physiques. So in my head I was thinking, there has to be a fucking way to just make it work within your busy life and still incorporate bodybuilding into your busy life to achieve your dream physique, right? Because there are so many benefits to having a physique like this that can bleed into your business success, and other aspects of your life. So before I really get into that, I just want to go over that quote because that really sat with me, and I do believe that one specific quote just drove me to want to figure out a way to help guys like this. So let's just go over a couple of these transformations here. So basically, Mike is 6 years old. This is him when he first started, back in just December of last year, and then we achieved this right here in about 3 months. So completely shredded, sub 10% body fat. He probably added about 10 to 15 pounds of muscle in this whole process, just from implementing the system. This is Jorge. So Jorge is another business owner. He was about 220 pounds here, and this one he's about 190 pounds. Put on muscle in the process, got way fucking leaner. He's in the best shape of his life. And this picture was even taken, about a month ago. He's even in even better shape now. Like, he has like fucking veins and striations and shit. Like, dude is getting peeled. But he's 42 years old. We made this transformation. This is in about 20 weeks. And then this is Luke. Luke is 36 years old. We made this transformation in about same time frame, 20 weeks. Added muscle, like looks completely fucking different. Body fat is significantly lower. Again, sub 10% body fat here. So these are the types of transformations that, are possible, like while, being over the age of 35, and running a full-time business. Like, a lot of people have like a limiting belief where once you reach a certain age, it's just not really possible to look like this. But I mean, these guys are all examples of just like how you can just crush that fucking limiting belief, because I mean they're walking fucking examples of this. So let's just go over this real quick. So when you're pushing the envelope of bodybuilding and you want to achieve your like best physique possible, right? We understand what goes into it, right? If you guys have watched a lot of my content, you guys, have, aren't living under a rock. It's like, you understand what goes into building a physique like this. And it does require some level of pushing the envelope with hormones, with training, with gear, and with, food and everything. So, you know, you can't do that 24/7, 365 days out of the year for fucking 30 years and expect just come out, everything being great, right? Because you're putting wear and tear on your body here, right? Like we have to understand that. So we have a finite time where we can do this, right? I always tell people, give yourself 5 to 15 years where you're just taking that time frame and doing everything you possibly can to get the most out of your bodybuilding. So you're not leaving anything on the table, and you can, eventually just, ride out that physique, maybe just cruise on a little bit of testosterone, and just got to maintain that, and knowing that you didn't leave anything on the table, and you achieved something, you achieved what you fucking wanted. So we don't want to waste that finite time is really what I'm saying here, because again, like, you cannot take grams and grams of gear for years. You cannot train to extreme levels of failure with heavy weights for years. Your body's going to break down. You cannot push food up to the levels that you need to. Your digestion is eventually going to wear down. So there's all this wear and tear in your body that you can't prolong for 20, 30, 40 years. It just doesn't make sense. So you got to make the most out of that finite time. Now, here's the thing. um, as a business owner, and this is, I understand this because, obviously, I'm an entrepreneur myself. I own a successful coaching business, basically built it from ground zero. And I understand, what this demographic wants out of building the physique, right? What the physique actually does, to their business success. So basically, we want a physique that commands respect amongst peers, coworkers, clients, and competition. Right? A physique that stands out when you go into a boardroom, or you're meeting with a client for the first time. Like, we know within 5 to 7 seconds, somebody's going to make a first impression of you. So when you have a physique that just stands out and shows that you truly respect yourself, that person, that client, that coworker, that peer is going to respect you more. So we want to build an unbreakable discipline and mindset that you can apply to your business success, right? If you're if you're able to endure a fucking hour, 30-minute long leg workout where you're training to fail, you're doing sets of 20, 30 rep squats, you're on the floor fucking ready to fucking puke. It's like, not everybody can do that, right? It's a small percentage of people that can do that. And you can apply that level of just pain endurance and like not giving up to every single other area of your life, right? It's building that unbreakable mindset. And we want basically a high levels to drive performance at your highest. So, we want to optimize our hormones to a point where we have energy, we have drive, we can apply that to our work productivity. So, and this is what I see this demographic struggles with the most, right? From the conversation that I have, with clients before they start working with me, basically, running a business, it's time consuming, right? There's some days where you're working 12, 16 hours, you're stressed, you're running around like a fucking madman. It's very time consuming, and obviously you see the return on it because, you see the financial return, but, at the cost of just not having fucking time. So basically you don't have time to fit in good workouts. Like, you just don't. You're either stressed at the end of the day, you're mentally drained, your workout performance suffers, or you just can't fucking fit it in. Um, you don't have time to eat like a bodybuilder, right? You could be in a workflow for 5 hours, and they just realize, oh shit, I haven't eaten a meal since like fucking 7 a.m. Right? Because you're in such a workflow. It happens to me, frequently. Um, I'm doing client work and everything. I'll set my alarm to eat, and then I'll be like, oh, I'll push it a little bit, and then I'll be like 3 hours later, I'm like, oh fuck, I haven't got my meal in yet, because I don't want to break that workflow. Um, so not knowing how to design PED protocols to optimize your hormones. So obviously, there's certain cycles you can take that, they will put on a lot of muscle in you, but they're going to make you feel like shit. They're going to make you feel like garbage. And there's other cycles you can take that, still give you that same level of progress, but make you feel on top of the world, right? So we want that latter option. And you want to push the envelope, but you want to do so safely because you want to keep your aging into consideration. Because remember, if you're watching this, this video is designed for people over the age of 35. So, you want to still push the envelope, but we have to understand your body is not as resilient as it was when you were in your 20s. It is what it is. So, this is basically how bodybuilders with no life outside of the gym live. And this is how I lived for years. Like, I built my physique basically doing this stuff, when I was in my early 20s, but I was also broke and I had nothing else going on besides just the gym, right? The gym was my only fucking thing, right? And, obviously when, you have a professional bodybuilder, that person is doing everything in their power to get the absolute most out of their physique. They're going to optimize every single aspect of their life to revolve around bodybuilding, right? But it's not realistic for a business owner because we have other shit going on. So, and keep in mind, if you're doing a competition or you're a competitive bodybuilder, you have to do this to some level. But again, it's like not everybody wants to step on stage in their fucking underwear, right? Some of us just want to walk around with a good physique, with a good bodybuilder physique, and still focus on our business and have that be the priority. So this is how these bodybuilders are basically living day to day. So they eat 78 meals a day, timing them perfectly on the dot, like literally setting alarms to eat, every 2 to 3 hours on the fucking dot without fail. They spend 2 hours in the gym 5 to 6 times per week plus cardio. So again, time right here. These are both extremely time consuming activities. They have a perfect sleep schedule, 8 to 10 hours of sleep, consistent timing of waking and sleep. And keep in mind, they design their schedules so they can absolutely make this happen. Now, we can try our best to get a consistent sleep schedule, but we have to understand we have work to do, right? We have a business to run. That's not always going to be a realistic thing. Naps throughout the day for recovery, right? A lot of you guys probably can't remember when the last time is, made time for a fucking nap. It is what it is, when you're in a workflow, when you're doing work, it's like, you don't really have the time to do that. And, multiple steroid/peptide shots per day and massive cycles that will essentially bog you down. So it's like these guys, they're probably taking like tons of growth hormone that makes them tired as shit. They're taking insulin. They're taking fucking 5 different peptide shots a day. They're taking massive cycles that make them feel like shit. And they see the return in their physique, right? They get really good results in the gym, and building muscle, but it bogs them down, right? But that bodybuilding goal is so important to them, they don't mind being bogged down. But the thing is, if you're running a business, you cannot afford to be bogged down, right? It will literally detriment you. And the whole theme here is this is not optimal if you run a business, right? For all those reasons I just mentioned. And so keep in mind, this is the most optimal situation for putting on muscle. However, if you value your business and financial success, this will ruin you. This will absolutely fucking ruin you. So the question lies, how do we actually achieve a bodybuilder like physique, bodybuilder like results in a realistic fashion, right? While still running a business. So let's go over this. So we have basically, so again, if you watch my my hour-long video about my framework, which you'll watch after this, again, I'll link it in the description. I'll link it over here in a little bit. There's basically 3 pillars that we want to focus on: training, nutrition, and hormones. So basically, I'm going to talk about all 3 pillars in here and how we're going to apply this for the specific demographic, business owners over the age of 35. Let's talk about training first. So the whole goal of the training for this demographic is obviously we want to build the most muscle and strength possible. We want to get productive workouts and efficient workouts in during the week that hit all the muscle groups with maximum intensity. We want to fit training into a busy work schedule with time efficiency and leeway. So, obviously, you can't afford, like I talked about before, spending 2-3 hours in the gym 5-6 times per week. It's going to take away from, like tasks that you have to do for your business. And we want to optimize recovery, because being over the age of 35, your recovery is going to take a little bit of a hit. Again, your body is not as resilient as it was when you were in your 20s. So we want to feel recovered enough to still progress in strength and still, get to that next workout the next week and feel recovered enough to perform, right? We don't want to be completely fucking feel like we got hit by a truck, right? So this is the solution. And this is something I actually do personally: a 4-day per week training split. So the reason why this works so well for this demographic is, number one, this is going to optimize recovery, because you have 3 rest days during the week where you basically hit that muscle group with the maximum intensity and give it a full week to recover, right? So you have 3 days where you're basically just resting, recovering, not really doing much. You're just focusing on your work and everything. And you're allowing your body to recuperate and recover. So you get to that next workout the next week and you feel refreshed, ready to fucking go, hit PRs, all that stuff. So those three rest days during the week, they allow leeway with a busy schedule. So you have 3 rest days per week where essentially you can push a session up or down during the week if your day is extremely busy and stressful. So for example, let's say you worked a 16-hour day, right? You were doing work, you were managing your employees, you're stressed, you could tell your cortisol's high, and then you get to the gym at the end of that day and you probably have a shitty workout. You're just not mentally there. You can't connect with the muscle the same way. Your technique isn't as dialed in. You're not getting a good pump. You're probably dehydrated. Maybe you didn't eat enough that day. And the workout was probably shit. And if you just pushed that to the next day where you're less busy, you probably would have had a better workout, right? So this allows you, those 3 rest days during the week allow you to push a session up if you need to, on a day where you have better recovery, you have better sleep, you're not as busy, so you have a more productive session. So at the end of the day, that having that productive session is going to be way more efficient, because you're going to get more out of it than if you did it when you're stressed, tired, all that stuff. So that 3 days of rest per week gives you leeway. So you also have 3 rest days in the week where you can just simply focus on your work and business. Like, I can't tell you how relieving it is to just have a rest day where I'm like, okay, I don't have to focus on the gym today. I can just focus on my work, focus on my clients, giving them, my full fulfillment, my full attention. And it's great. You have your days where you focus on the gym, get that done in the morning, whatever, then have the rest of the day to focus on your clients. Then you have those rest days where it's like you just focus on your work. So how do we structure this training split? So day 1, I usually like to do a push day. Day 2, I like to do a pull day. Day 3, arm day. And day 4 be a leg day. So keep in mind, this is going to be variable depending on the person's situation, their work schedule, what their goal is, what muscle groups they need to bring up, all that stuff. The recovery ability. There's a lot of variability to this, but this is typically how I do like to structure it. So to get the most out of these sessions, remember, we only have 4 sessions per week, so we want to get the absolute most out of them. So we want to begin the workout with 1 to 2 compound exercises where you basically make it your effort to get strong and skillful at that movement. And we want to keep these movements consistent. So for example, let's say we're trying to bring up our legs, right? So we have a barbell squat as our first exercise on our leg day, right? We want to keep that consistent. We want to keep the barbell squat in our program because we want to get really strong and we want to get better at that movement. So for example, like let's say, day 1, you're squatting 225 pounds for 10 reps. Day 300, you're squatting 315 pounds for 20 reps. Your legs are going to be bigger. There is no question about it. It's physically impossible for your legs not to be bigger because you're doing more load for more reps. And you got better at that movement. So what you do in the gym from today should not be what you're doing in the gym, 5 months from now. So you want to get strong and skillful at those movements and keep them consistent. So we're, building a strength foundation and, building basically the foundation of our physique, compound movements we get good at. And basically we want to finish the workout with isolation and accessory movements for higher reps. So these exercises can be variable, based on gym access, gym equipment availability, all that stuff. Because, obviously we want to keep the first couple exercises consistent so we get good at them. But the goal kind of shifts when we get into the end of the workout because the goal goes from, getting, from strength-based exercises to just driving blood and volume for hypertrophy. So for example, like let's say we're training side delts and you only have an hour to train. All the fucking dumbbells are being taken by the broccoli haired 16-year-olds, right? So you go on the cable and you just do your ladder raises there. Or if the dumbbells are open, you just go on the dumbbell rack and do your ladder raises there. So the movement patterns stay the same. The goal is driving blood into the side delts to get a good pump and finish out that muscle group. So those exercises can be variable based on whatever you have access to, time, all that stuff. And basically, we want to throw in intensifiers to get the most intensity and stimulus out of the least amount of time. So, for example, again, we want to make sure those sessions are as efficient and as intentional as possible, so we get the most out of that little time we have in the gym. A good way to do that and keep it time efficient is intensifiers. Drop sets, supersets, rest pause sets. So, for example, like you do a drop set on your squats, for example, or maybe your leg press. You can get so much out of that one set. If you go from like 5 plates to failure, then 3 plates to failure, then 2 plates to failure, like your quads are going to be fucking lit up. So you can get so much out of those couple sets with intensifiers. So workouts should be no longer than 1.5 hours, and some can even be done in 45 minutes. Seriously, if you're doing these workouts correctly, you can get these done in 45 minutes if they're extremely intense. So this is just an example of how I would lay this out. So Monday would be a chest and side delt day. So again, we start with our compound movements that we keep consistent. So we do like an incline bench press, we do a hammer strength chest press, and again, we make it a mission to get stronger and better at these movements. So better execution, better form, more reps, more weight, slowly over time to build up that foundation. And then we finish off the workout with some isolation stuff. So incline dumbbell flies, cable flies, getting a good pump, good contraction, driving blood, volume, ladder raises, any variation you want, upright rows, any variation you want, again, depending on gym access and equipment availability and all that stuff, how much time you have in your hands. So same format for back and rear delts. We start with our compound movements, barbell row, weighted pull up. Then we do some accessories, and then finish off with the isolations, rear delt flies. Same format for arms and side delts, right? Same format for legs. Barbell squats. You're going to be, if you're doing these barbell squats correctly, you're going to be tapped. You're going to be absolutely tapped out of those 2 sets. And then you finish off with your high rep leg presses, high rep leg extensions, all that stuff, and just finish out that muscle. So that's basically how I would structure the training aspect. So let's go over nutrition, because this is really important. I'm just going to take a sip of water here. I'm talking really fast. There we go. Mouth always gets parched when I'm making these videos. But yeah, so nutrition. Let's go over the goals for nutrition. So we want to put on the most amount of muscle possible while keeping a good lean body composition, right? We don't want to get fat when we're putting on muscle. We want to stay, very lean. Because again, if you watch my hour-long video, I'm going to link in the description. You'll know the importance of why why we need to stay lean during our growing phase, because insulin sensitivity, nutrient partitioning, all that stuff. You build muscle a lot more efficiently when you're lean. We use nutrition to do that. Anyways, that's a whole nother topic for that video that you'll watch. So time efficiency. We want time efficiency with the meals, so you can focus on your work, not scarfing down food 24/7. And we want time efficiency with meal prep, and we do that through simplicity, which I'll explain in a little bit. Simplicity with the meals. So the solution to this, 4 to 5 meals a day. So not like the 7 to 8 that you're seeing from the optimized bodybuilder with no life protocol, right? We can condense this to 4 to 5 meals and still get extremely, extremely good results. All these guys up here, they're all training 4 times a week. They're all eating 4 to 5 meals a day, and they look like this, right? So it's possible doing that with only 4 to 5 meals. So we want simplicity with the food items. So basic stuff: meat, rice, vegetables, fruit. We want palatability. We want our food to actually taste good so we can adhere to it. And we want 1 to 2 free meals per week, so we have some leeway with, business, client, family dinners, all that stuff. So we have a life outside of bodybuilding for a little bit, right? And again, all these guys up here, they have at least 1 free meal per week, sometimes even 2. And they look like this, eating 1 to 2 cheat meals per week. So let's go over why this works so well with this demographic. Again, why this works so well for business owners over the age of 35. So the 4 to 5 meals a day allow for easy meal prep and not spending your entire day getting meals in. So you can just focus more on your work, right? Eating 7 to 8 meals a day, that's a lot. Let's say it takes about 15, 30 minutes to eat a meal over 7 to 8 times per day. That time fucking adds up. That adds up. 4 to 5 meals allows for ample time in between your meals so you're not bogged down and lethargic from eating and having that affect your work productivity. So you probably sometimes realize when you eat a meal, you just sometimes want to take a nap, right? Depending on how big that meal is or how many carbs are in that meal. And we want to prevent that as much as possible because, when we have work to do, we don't want to feel bogged down and lethargic. So spacing out those meals enough, with 4 to 5 meals will prevent you from getting lethargic and bogged down. So we want simplicity with the food options. So it allows for easy and manageable meal prep during the week. It is so goddamn easy to just prep a rack of chicken breast, some steak, put rice in the rice cooker, have meals for the entire week, right? You just weigh them out as you go. Super simple. And like if you have an important goal in mind, like you can if you have a serious goal in mind, you can make some time, 1 hour during the week where you just prep all your food. Super simple. And again, we don't need to have like all this intricate food and optimizing every single little fucking nitpicky thing to make a 1% difference. It's like we just have steak, rice, chicken, and eggs, and you can make insane progress eating those foods, and it makes your meal prep a lot easier. So we want palatability to make your meals enjoyable, so you can actually eat them instead of just staring at a plate of boiled chicken breast and spinach, right? That I would throw up if I had to eat that, right? So you take a little bit of time, add a little bit of seasoning to your chicken and everything, make them taste fucking good. I use Kinder seasoning. It's a line of seasoning that they usually have it at Whole Foods. It tastes fantastic. Like I actually look forward to eating my chicken and rice every single day because of that seasoning. So anything you can do to make your food taste good, while staying within the ranges of your caloric needs, your caloric intake, then that's okay. And again, the free meals allow you to live your life and be flexible when going out with family or going on business outings with clients. So again, we're not stepping on stage here. We still want to have a life outside of the gym. If you want to go out with your family or your business colleagues, on a Friday night, have maybe 1 or 2 drinks, go out for a nice steak. That's completely fine. Step away from bodybuilding for a little bit. You're not stepping on stage here. Like I said before, all these guys up here, they do that once or twice a week. They have those free meals. Okay, so let's go over an example nutrition plan. So meal one. So again, keeping it simple, keeping it easy to meal prep, everything like that. Obviously everything's still going to be weighed out. We still have to do that to look like a bodybuilder, right? We need to know what's going into our body. But again, like the food options are so fucking simple here. Meal one, 250 grams of egg whites, 2 whole eggs, 60 grams of oats, 100 grams of berries. Easy. Make that in the morning before you go to work. Meal two, 6 ounces of chicken breast, 200 grams of white rice, half a tablespoon of olive oil, 3 ounces of green vegetables. Easy. You should, if you do meal prep 1 hour during the week, you should already have that ready, in a big Tupperware. Have all your meal or have all your chicken cut up and cooked. You just throw it on the food scale, weigh it out, put in the Tupperware, good to go. Meal two. I'm sorry, this should be meal three, but same exact thing. Same thing. Meal four. Same thing, just with a different protein source. Keep it fresh. Tilapia and cod. Meal four. A little bit of a fattier protein option here. So 93.7 beef. Potatoes for some potassium and some variation, and micronutrients. And again, 3 ounces of green vegetables. All these meals right here, super, super easy to prep. Nothing's overly complicated. We're not adding, 5 grams of almond butter here, fucking, I don't know, like 20 grams of flax seeds there. It's like, everything's super manageable. You just throw in your Tupperware and you're set for the day. And then we have, we still want to optimize the training window, right? So we have the intra-workout drink, which is, 30 grams of dextrose. You'd bring that in a shaker cup, have it ready. And the post-workout would just be like 2 scoops away. And I talk about the importance of this intra-workout drink in the other video that you're going to watch in the description. And all we have to do here is keep the same exact diet. And when we're bulking, we just gradually increase the carbohydrates. When we're cutting, we just gradually decrease the carbohydrates and add cardio. and we keep the protein relatively consistent year round. And again, like just like with the training, these changes are variable and situation dependent. So it can be kind of difficult to know when to make those adjustments to your diet. But just understand, it's relatively simple just to keep this framework and just increase the carbs when we need to bulk, decrease the carbs when we need to cut. So simple. Nutrition's not rocket science. Keep that in mind. So let's go over the fun stuff. So this is the steroid protocols. So obviously, if you watch a lot of my content, the hormone protocols are an extremely important variable to all this, right? They make everything tie in together. Without gear, without steroids, bodybuilding just doesn't exist. You're just not really going to get the physique that you want. You're not going to get that bodybuilder fucking dominant physique that stands out in the crowd, that commands respect. You're just not going to get that without gear. It is what it is. People can cry about it, but you guys know the reality. So obviously the goal with and this should say gear. That's my bad. So the goal with gear, with the steroids, this should be to achieve bodybuilder like results, to push the envelope while being conscious of age, and to optimize hormones for drive and work performance. So we want the hormone protocol to help us with our bodybuilding, but also at the same time help us with our business, right? This is why like so many CEOs and business owners, even if they don't look like bodybuilders, maybe they just go to the gym a couple times a week, they're all on testosterone. They're all in testosterone. They all probably even use some DHE derivatives too, just because having those optimized hormones just helps them just stay super productive, super focused, high energy, gives them that like competitive drive that puts them at an advantage over all their competitors, right? If you can work harder because your hormones are optimized, and you just don't get tired, blow people out of the water that don't have that. It is what it is. So the solution here: 800 to 2,000 milligrams of total anabolics weekly, and this range is going to depend on the goal, the risk tolerance, how old you are, all that stuff. What we're trying to do in that specific phase. So this is going to have some variance here. This isn't going to look the same for everybody. We want to run mostly injectables year round. And the reason for that, we obviously don't want to run tren and orals year round because it's going to make you feel like shit. Your health markers are going to be terrible, and that's just not how we do bodybuilding, right? It's mostly injectables that we run year round. Just having stuff in the background that just helps us recover and helps us have good workouts. So we want to pick compounds with low side effect profiles that don't overly skew the health markers and do not convert to estrogen. So, obviously we want to have some sort of testosterone base, masteron and primobolan. This is usually what I prescribe to, the guys that I work with that are in this demographic. Because again, being over the age of 35, you have to keep health into consideration, right? Your body is not as resilient as it was when you're younger. So testosterone, masteron, and primobolan are the main injectables I use. All these guys up here are either on testosterone, or all of them are on testosterone, but they're either taking masteron, primobolan, or both. Let's go down here again. So basically, we want to pick compounds that will not make you feel like shit and give you issues that will affect your work performance. So, for example, like most people can tolerate test, mast, and primo very, very easily, right? All you have to do is just make sure that if you're really prone to having your estrogen crashed, you don't take too much masteron or too much primo, or you just modulate the ratios. And again, that can be kind of a tricky thing to do. So it's going to take some trial and error. But if you're taking like fucking 2,000 milligrams of test and deca and D-ball, you're going to feel like garbage, and it's going to affect your work performance. You're going to be tired. You're going to be bogged down. You're going to be holding water. You might have some mood swings that might affect, certain business decisions you have to make, and you'll make like emotional based decisions because you're fucking moody because your estrogen and prolactin's all high, and then you go home and you cry after listening to a song or something that, so, you want to make sure that doesn't happen, right? When you run a business, you want to remove emotion from your business. And you want to make, logical decisions, right? This is why guys go fucking crazy when they take tren. Like a lot of my business owners, we only take trend for a short period of time, and I'll explain that in a little bit. But yeah, you don't want to be running trend year rounds, right? That can cause some problems. So we want to pick compounds that will promote high energy and drive. So these are mostly going to be DHT derivatives. Guys, when they take Masteron and Primo, they feel on top of the world. They feel fucking amazing. I love taking Masteron because I feel like it just gives me this certain drive that other compounds won't. So we want to use growth hormone to still push the envelope and will require overall less AAS usage, less overall steroid usage, because we can just take more growth hormone and less of the other stuff to maintain better health markers and still push the envelope and grow the way we want to. And it can also help recovery too. Actually, I'll explain that in a second. But yeah, so the use of heavy hitters like tren and orals are going to be used periodically for a certain purpose, like strategically, and not for long term. So the reason this framework works, or this steroid framework works so well for this demographic, business owners over age 35. So the 800 to 2,000 milligrams will still allow you to push the envelope without bogging you down and putting your health at unnecessary risk. So obviously, when you reach a certain threshold of gear, 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 milligrams of gear, you're playing around with your health, right? And if you're at a certain age bracket, that's not something you want to be dealing with, right? You want to make sure that you stay in good health so you can do this as long as you possibly can, right, for longevity. But also, you don't want to have any fucking adverse events happen where now you're in the fucking hospital because your kidneys were fucked because you took too much tren and winstrol and shit, and now your business is affected, your family's affected, and you're the sole breadwinner of the people around you. So to put that at risk and to put that in jeopardy is not necessary. It's really not. So again, this is why the approach has to be taken differently for that higher age demographic. We take a more health conscious approach. So running mostly injectables like Test, Primo, Masteron, again, this will allow health markers to stay at a manageable level. These are relatively innocuous compounds, meaning they're not going to overly skew your health markers if you take, a decent amount of them for a long time. This is why you can run longer cycles using mostly just injectables. Versus the other stuff like the tren, the nandrolones, the orals, all that stuff, they can really fuck you up. High liver enzymes, bad kidney markers, blood pressure issues, just not needed. Not needed. Compound selection will not cause unnecessary side effects like low energy, mood swings, etc. that will affect work performance. Using DHT derivatives will give you high energy, high confidence, and drive to perform. So like we talked about before, using DHT derivatives, all my clients, that use them, they feel on top of the world, not getting mood swings. They feel confident, in social and business situations. And they just feel like they can just fucking lock in and work for fucking hours using that stuff. Low to moderate growth hormone usage will enhance recovery, reduce the risk of injury, promote better sleep, and allow for overall less AAS usage. So again, this is why this is really important for this age demographic. Again, your body is not as resilient as it was when you're younger. So your recovery ability diminishes as you get older, and your joints go under wear and tear from all the shit you were doing in your younger age. Maybe you're training like a fucking idiot in your 20s, and now it's starting to catch up to you. So using some growth hormone is gonna help just enhance the recovery. It's gonna help joint lubrication. It's going to help connective tissue remodeling and recovery. So it's a really good compound that I use for my my older clients. So using tren and orals for short periods of time will basically just push past strength plateaus will allow you to still use these compounds but keep health markers in check. So we're only talking like max 2 to 4 weeks that we're using these. And then we just cut them out after we achieve the goal. So we don't run them for long term at all. And they're not off the table, but we don't run them long term. So these are some example cycles that I run with some of these guys. Again, this is all variable. You can, maybe don't try to replicate this. I mean, this is relatively, the same framework that I would use, but this is not going to work for everybody because everybody responds differently to these compounds. These are simply just examples. So let's just go over one of them right here. So weeks 1 through 8. So we start with 500 mgs of test, 400 primo, 4 I use a GH. Week 8 through 16, maybe we bump up the injectables a little bit. So we bump up the test, 750 milligrams, bump up the primo to 600 milligrams, and then 6 IUs of growth hormone. And then weeks 12 through 8, we keep the same injectables. Then we add in, a little bit of tren just for those last 4 weeks, just to, push past your strength plateau, hit some PRs, really to max out the amount of growth. And then we finish out our cycle and we go back to a cruise. We go down to a cruise dose of testosterone. So we finish out the cycle with that heavy hitter and then go back to TRT, reset the health markers, do it again. So, as you guys can see, this is still relatively under 2,000 milligrams of gear per week. Easy. No orals either. So this is an example with orals right here. So this is going to be 500 mgs a test, 350 mgs of Masteron, 4 IUs of GH. This will probably be like a cutting cycle. So then we up the, as the cycle continues, we up the injectables. So 750 mgs a test, 500 mgs of Masteron, 6 IUs of growth hormone. And then we finish off that cut. This is probably when you're getting at the end of your cutting phase, when your strength starts to diminish and you're really lean, you want to just peak that look. We finish off with the same dose of injectables, then adding in some Anavar and Winstrol towards the end. So this right here, this would be probably a higher usage approach. So somebody, maybe that's a little bit in that younger age demographic. So, someone from 35 to 40, their risk tolerance is a little bit higher, but they still obviously want to keep, everything relatively safe. So we'd start off with a higher dose of injectables. So 750 mgs a test, 500 mgs of primo, 4 A's of GH. Then we up the test to about 1,000, as we get deeper into the cycle, and then up the growth hormone as well. And then basically we finish off, same dose of injectables. And then we just finish off those last 4 weeks just using some anadrol on training days, just bust past strength plateaus. And then we cut off the anadrol. So keep in mind, after doing all this stuff right here, all 3 of these cycles, we would just go down to a cruise dose. We'd run the cycle for about, 5 months, 6 months, 8 months, absolute max, and then go down to a cruise, reset health markers for about 8, 12 weeks, and then run it back. So let's break this down over a full year. So just about a year where we basically just implement all this stuff. Okay. So phase 1, and again, if you haven't watched the hour-long video, once you watch that, it's going to make a lot more sense of how I break it down. Basically, in the True Bodybuilder method, we have 3 phases in our program. We have the lean-out phase, we have the maintenance phase, then we have the push-up and growth phase. So we phase it out into three portions. So the whole goal of the lean-out phase first is going to be for about 12 to 16 weeks. So the whole goal here is basically a cutting phase to get you down to about 8 to 10% body fat. We want to improve your body composition. And the whole goal here is to optimize insulin sensitivity and nutrient partitioning and build muscle the most optimally for future phases. So we're priming your body to grow using this phase right here, because when you get down to a really low body fat percentage, your insulin sensitivity is as highest. That means the ability to partition the food that you're eating to your muscle is going to be as high, so you build muscle at the most efficient rate. So this is why, again, once you watch that video, that I'm going to link in the description, you guys will understand this way, way more. So just make sure you watch that. And again, this primes your body for your growth phase. So training, we're going to keep the training probably about the same for all 3 of these phases. I don't usually touch the training because, again, I want to keep it as consistent as possible. So, my clients and the guys using these programs, they get really good at those movements. So we want to do about a 4-day per week training split, like you mentioned before. So we have the push day, the pull day, the arm day, and the leg day. Nutrition, basically we're going to keep the same diet that I just showed you up here. So we have the meal 1, which is the egg meal. Then we have the 2 chicken meals, the fish meal, the beef meal, then the pre and post workout. I'm sorry, the intra and post workout. And again, we taper the carbohydrates down and increase cardio to put you into a calorie deficit until the desired body fat is achieved. So we're going to take the same diet and just slowly lower the carbs, slowly increase the cardio until your body fat is about 8 to 10%. And after we achieve that, we finish out this phase. So the PEDs, I like to use a more moderate usage approach when we're doing the lean out phase, just because we don't need a whole lot of gear to maintain muscle mass. Because we want to save that larger cycle for our growing phase when it makes the most sense, right? When we're combining it with a high level of food to promote recovery and just get the maximum growth possible, right? Because when we combine high food and high anabolics with really good training, that's when we make explosive progress. So with this phase, we don't want to tap you out right here and there. It doesn't make sense. So moderate usage approach, want to save the larger cycles for the growing phase. So an example of this would be like 500 mgs a test, 350 mgs of Masteron, then maybe add in some tren and orals the last 4 weeks as strength and gym performance starts to dip and to really peak that look what we talked about before. Because when you're at like 10% body fat, you take a little bit of tren, you're going to look insane. So let's go over the cruise phase, the maintenance phase. So after we finish out that dieting phase, that lean out phase, we're likely gonna want to get some blood work to see where you're at, and then go into a cruise period, which is going down to a low dose of testosterone, TRT, and just basically reset your health markers, get healthy again, and prime yourself for our next push, the push up phase, which is after this, the growing phase. So the whole goal here, right, is to reset health markers and prime body for growing phase. We want to maintain the body composition that we achieved from the lean out phase during this phase. We want to emphasize recovery. So basically, we just recover your health markers, we recover your body, so you're nice and fresh and you're ready to push again when it's time to grow. So again, 8 to 12 weeks, we're going to run this phase. So training, again, we keep the same exact training, 4 days a week training split. And we may want to lower the volume during this phase to account for the lowered recovery from the less gear usage. Remember, we're only on 200 to 300 milligrams of test during this phase. Recovery ability is not going to be at its highest, when it was right here, when you're on a lot more gear. So we might want to lower that volume a little bit. We don't want to do it right off the bat, but towards the end, we might want to lower it a little bit. So nutrition. So we're going to do a slight bump up in food from our peak cutting diet. So this is just going to put you at maintenance calories to hold on to that 8 to 10% body fat that we achieved during our lean out phase. So when we got to the end of our lean out phase, our food was probably pretty low, and you were probably starving and very hungry. So we don't need to keep you in that state to maintain your body composition. We can bump up your food a little bit to promote recovery and to put you at maintenance calories so we hold on to that size. So we just from your peak diet right here, which is probably, at, maybe 100 grams of carbs, something like that. We just bump your food up a little bit from there. And then PEDs, 200 to 300 milligrams of test only. And if we're using growth hormone, we just keep the GH in for recovery. If we were using a higher dose, we'd probably put you at like a lower dose, like 2 to 3 IUs, just a maintenance replacement dose. Because I do believe GH can be used year round. But again, that's a whole nother topic for another video. Okay, now this is where it gets fun. This is the growth and push-up phase. So we'll run this for about 20 to 30 weeks. So again, we want ample time in this phase to solidify that muscle tissue. Okay. So the goal here is to stack on size. And because we primed our body with these two phases right here, we got you lean and we got you really healthy. And, and we had that full period where we recovered during your maintenance phase. Now your body is primed and ready to grow. So you're going to have the most efficient and productive growth possible in this phase. So we want to maintain your body composition and insulin sensitivity while pushing food. So we want to stay lean while we're pushing food up because, the leaner we stay, the more insulin sensitive we stay and the more we grow. So if we get too fat, if you fuck this up and you get way too fat and your body composition gets to like 20% body fat, you're not going to grow as optimally. Your muscle growth is going to be extremely diminished. So you have to diet you down again. Versus we keep you lean during this phase, this is where you have the best growth. And this is going to be, again, that's a whole nother topic for another video of how to do this. I actually have a full video on carb cycling, which again, I'll link down below. I'll even link it right here too. I'll link down below in the description, which is going to tell you how to incorporate carb cycling to optimize insulin sensitivity and stay at a lean body composition, a lean body fat while you bulk. So watch that video again. There are a lot of videos to watch here, but again, you could literally watch all this content and design your own program. That's how, that's how much value I'm putting into this. But anyways, so this is going to be a prolonged growth period to solidify size. We need time in a growth phase to push food up to high levels, solidify muscle tissue, and achieve newfound strength levels and have ample exposure to these hormones. So this is why we run this growing phase for 20 to 30 weeks. We need a good amount of time in this phase to expose yourself to all this stuff, achieve new levels of strength, push your food up to 4,000 calories, and push your body weight up to 20, 30 pounds extra than you were before. So training, still doing 4 times a week. That's not going to change. So we may want to reallocate some volume towards some body parts that need improvement. But other than that, we keep that same split because remember, this is the split that works to to account for your busy schedule. So you don't want to change that. Nutrition, gradual increase in food to increase body weight and maintain body composition. So again, like watch the carb cycling video of how to do this. But again, we want to run this exact same diet, exact same simple diet, and just slowly titrate up those carbs. And PEDs, we're going to use mostly injectables and GH, again, to maintain health markers and to prolong this as much as possible. We only want to use orals and tren as plateau busters. So for example, let's say we're midway through our bulking phase and we run into a strength plateau. We throw in 50 mgs of anadrol for 3 weeks, break past that strength plateau. Okay, now we have a new level of strength. We cut the anadrol out because it's probably making us liver toxic. And then we can now achieve progressive overload again and use new weights in the gym. So this is going to be a higher usage approach, right? Because remember, we're saving this higher usage cycle for the growing phase because we took these 2 phases and we're a little bit more moderate. So the reason we use a higher usage approach is because with higher PED load and the combination of more food, that's going to cause explosive growth. So an example of this would be 750 mgs of test, 500 mgs of primo, 4 A's of GH, maybe to start, and then we may increase that overall AES load as needed. So when we run into plateaus, we would increase the anabolics, maybe add a compound, maybe increase the dosage of a compound, increase the growth hormone. Again, it's all going to be situation dependent. So it might be hard for you to make those adjustments on your own. So it's again going to take some trial and error of when to figure out when exactly to increase those. And again, orals and tren for short periods of time to break past strength plateaus. We don't want to run those for the entire 30 weeks. You're going to have a bad time. You're going to feel like shit. Okay. So, guys, using this exact framework right here, you could literally design a year-long protocol. You could take this video and design your own fucking program. Literally, you could do that. So again, if you're a business owner, you're busy as fuck, you still want to look like a bodybuilder, you're over the age of 35 and you still want to push the envelope and you want to, get physiques like these guys, you can incorporate this framework and it's going to tell you exactly how to do that. And it's like almost the exact same, kind of thing I give to these guys right here. And, this is why they look the way they do. So again, this is why, the reason why I made this video is because this demographic specifically, business owners over the age of 35, they do the best in this program because they just put their mind to something and they just fucking execute, right? There's a certain mentality of guys that run businesses, guys that have built something from ground zero and just put all their effort into it, did not let themselves fail and just executed. And they saw a vision right in front of them and they just did everything required to get there. And this is why these guys look the way they do. And, this is why this works right here for that demographic. So this is, again, probably one of my most valuable videos I've ever made here. Because again, you guys can literally take this exact thing that I just said that I just mentioned for the past hour almost and design your own program. So lots of value here. I hope you guys, got something out of this and hope you guys can, start to apply this stuff and start making leaps in progress. Because again, if you're a busy guy and you're having trouble incorporating bodybuilding into your life, this will help you. And again, once you achieve that physique that that portrays dominance, portrays respect, and everything is going to bleed into your business success. I guarantee it. All these guys right here, they make more money now. They just make more money now because they built up the discipline habits. They built up the physique that commands respect, and they respect themselves more and they carry a better self-image. And it bleeds into their business success. So again, hope you guys enjoyed this video. I'm going to end it here. Go ahead and watch the other 2 videos linked in the description. The number one that I'm going to have you watch is going to be the True Bodybuilder Method, the hour-long video that describes this framework in a lot more detail. And then obviously the carb cycling approach to help you guys incorporate with the diet. But appreciate you guys watching this, and definitely more of these types of videos to come.